Subscribe to Man Told for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. On our 10th wedding anniversary, I stood outside the hotel room. Through the crack in the door, I saw a man's hand on my wife's waist. I had flown over 2,000 miles, from Denver to Chicago, carrying a bouquet of white lilies and the necklace Madeline once dreamed of owning, all just to surprise her. I wanted to see her eyes light up. I wanted to hear her laugh, the way she did on our wedding day. But what I heard now was that same laugh, mixed with a man's deep voice and the soft clink of wine glasses. The 14th floor hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Warm yellow light fell across the thick carpet. A faint trace of men's cologne drifted in the air, one I had never smelled in our home. I stepped back, into the corner, half of me swallowed by shadow, my heart pounding hard. The door opened wider. A man in a white shirt, sleeves rolled high, bent down to pick up a paper bag from the hallway. Just a few seconds, but long enough to see Madeline standing close behind him, wineglass in hand, smiling. They had no idea I was there. I gripped the bouquet so tight, the lily petals trembled. Part of me wanted to storm in, to shout, to demand, why? But another part was afraid. Afraid that if I did, I'd never go back to the okay life I thought we had. My phone buzzed. A text from Noah, our son. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. I love you both. It felt like something clamped around my chest. I stared at those innocent words and felt a cold distance stretch between me and that door. I once thought the happiest moment of my life would be this anniversary, but it only took 10 seconds for it to become the worst day I've ever known. And I knew if I stepped through that door tonight, nothing would ever be the same again. If you had met me a few months ago, you would have thought I was a lucky man. A complete family, a steady career, and a wife, straight out of a painting. I'm Trevor Henderson, 38, living in Denver. I run a mid-sized interior design company, specializing in high-end homes. The work keeps me busy, but it gives us a good life. Enough for me to take care of my wife and our son. Madeline, my wife, wasn't just beautiful. She was smart and effortless with people. We met 12 years ago at a home design expo. She was still a project assistant for an architecture firm back then. I remember her in a navy blue dress, standing in a booth surrounded by hanging lights. Her eyes lit up as we talked about the first blueprints I had ever designed. 2 years later, we were married. The first years of our marriage felt like a dream. We traveled, tried new restaurants. Winters were spent curled up on the couch, watching old movies. When Noah was born, our joy doubled. I still remember holding him for the first time, Madeline smiling at me, her eyes filled with pride. But in the past few years, something shifted. My business grew fast, which meant more late nights at the office. Madeline quit her architecture job to find a new direction. First, it was classes in interior design, then a few short-term projects, then more conferences, more spa weekends with her friends. I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. We'd been through so much together. I believed the bond between us was strong enough to survive short separations. But a month before that trip to Chicago, I started to feel the distance. She shared less. Her phone always face down. Evening calls taken out on the balcony. When I asked, she said they were friends or potential clients. I almost brought it up directly, but every time I saw her packing for another trip, I told myself she deserves to rest, to enjoy herself. Maybe that was my biggest mistake, letting silence become our habit. Looking back now, the signs were right there. I just brushed them aside, telling myself it was nothing. For more than a year, our mornings had changed. Back then, when I stood at the mirror, Madeline would come over, fix my tie, and ask, "Busy day?" I'd kiss her forehead before walking out the door. Now, I just hear the shower running. I tie my own tie. Those quiet mornings had become normal without me even noticing. She was home less at night, too. Some evenings, Noah and I would finish dinner, build Lego sets at the living room table, and her phone would buzz. She'd look at the screen, smile, step onto the balcony. I'd hear her voice, soft, low, drawn out, just like the way she spoke that night in Chicago. The same laugh, over the sound of wine glasses clinking. Even now, Thinking about it, chills crawl up my arms. I believed I was giving Madeline a better life. No financial stress, no work pressure, freedom to follow whatever she wanted. But maybe I had just left an empty space, and someone else stepped in. The Chicago trip started with the simplest idea. Madeline said she'd be at a 3-day conference, staying at a hotel downtown. I decided to fly in on the second day with flowers and a gift. Make it a memory she'd never forget. I even asked my team to rearrange my schedule. Told Madeline I'd be in meetings all week. In my head, I could already see her opening the door, eyes tearing up, throwing her arms around me, whispering, "You are the best surprise." But real life isn't a movie. The morning I flew out, Noah came with me to the airport. He hugged me, smiling. "Dad, take a picture of you two for me, okay?" I nodded, my heart full of excitement. I had no idea. A few hours later, I'd be standing outside a hotel room, flowers shaking in my hands. Every bit of trust I had, crushed. Some nights now, lying in bed alone, I ask myself, if I hadn't gone to Chicago that day, if I'd let Madeline come home like always, would I still be living in that comfortable lie? For months, maybe years. Or would the truth have found a way to knock on my door? Just later. I don't know. But I know one thing. That moment outside the hotel room was the beginning of an ending. After leaving the 14th floor hallway that night, I didn't rush away. I stood near the elevator, hidden in the corner, trying to catch my breath. My heart pounded like war drums. 100 questions spun through my head. If I had knocked on that door just now, what would have happened? Would Madeline have been shocked? Would she have cried? Or would she have looked at me like a stranger, interrupting her world? I chose silence, but not the kind that walks away. I needed the truth, raw and unfiltered. I went down to the front desk, pretending to book another room for a business partner who'd just arrived. The clerk smiled politely, fingers tapping quickly on the keyboard. "Would you like it on the 14th floor as well, sir?" I nodded. When she turned the screen toward me to confirm, my eyes stopped on one line: Madeline Henderson, Daniel Brooks. I had never heard the name before, but those 2 words made my stomach tighten. My room was diagonally across from theirs, just a few steps away. From where I stood, I could see their door every time it opened. I left my door cracked, just enough to watch. Around 7 p.m., and their door swung open. Madeline stepped out, wearing the black dress I'd bought her last year. Red heels, a brand new purse in her hand. Daniel wore a gray suit, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his hand resting on her back, like it had been there 100 times before. I held my breath. As they walked past, I heard Daniel say, "I'll call the lawyer next week." Don't worry. A lawyer. My mind lit up with possibilities. Divorce, property, or something I hadn't even imagined. I stepped back, heart pounding, watching them until the elevator doors closed. Over 2 hours later, they came back. Slow steps, soft laughter, the sound of heels tapping on the carpet. At the door, Daniel leaned down, whispered something, and Madeline laughed, her hand on his chest. Then she opened the door, letting him in first, as if it were their home. I sat on the edge of my bed, fists clenched. 10 years. I had trusted her more than I trusted myself. And now, I was sitting here, wondering how blind I'd been. I pulled out my phone, texting a friend back in Denver. He's a lawyer. "How do you legally collect proof of infidelity?" He called me right away. His voice, steady, deliberate. "Trev, are you sure? Once you start, there's no way back." I looked toward the door across the hall. "I'm sure, and I want to do it by the book." He told me how to log times, places, record from public areas, and never, ever step into their room. That night, I sat by the window, Chicago's lights flickering below. Every time laughter drifted from the room across the hall, I saw the white lilies in the corner, petals drooping, forgotten. I was about to close the curtains when Madeline appeared in the hallway, alone, phone in hand, and she looked straight toward my room. She stood there for a few seconds, her eyes scanning the hall, then stopping at the crack in my door. My heart raced like I'd been caught. Even though I was the one watching, she raised the phone to her ear, walked slowly toward the elevator. Her voice carried back, low and quick. "Yeah, he's flying home tomorrow, but we have to deal with Trevor first." "No, Noah's easy." The kid trusts me. Hearing my son's name between those two sentences sent a cold rush down my spine. Deal with Trevor. Noah's easy. What was she planning? And since when had my son become part of her plans? The elevator doors closed, leaving the hallway empty. I stepped out, wanting to follow, but reason pulled me back. I couldn't act recklessly. I went back inside, opened the small notebook in my suitcase, and began writing down every detail. Times, clothes, words, even the direction they walked. My lawyer's voice echoed in my head. Small details can be the biggest pieces. Around 10 p.m., their door opened again. Daniel stepped out alone, shirt tucked in, no tie. He went down to the front desk, signed something, came back with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. As he passed my room, he whistled, a tune I didn't know, but to me, it was the sound of betrayal. I took a few photos from the crack in my door, careful not to be seen. My chest burned, but I knew each picture was proof. The night dragged on. Close to midnight, their lights were still on. Muffled voices, laughter. I lay in bed, eyes open, remembering the times Madeline laughed in my arms, now tangled with the sound of her laughing. In another man's, around 1 a.m., their door opened again. Madeline stepped out, hair slightly messy, wrapped in a hotel robe, phone in hand. Her voice louder this time. Don't worry, he suspects nothing. He trusts me completely. I realized then I wasn't as afraid of being betrayed as I was of the moment I'd have to face, when the person I loved most could look me straight in the eye and lie. I sat down, head in my hands. Noah's face flashed in my mind, his bright eyes when he wished us a happy anniversary. Could I protect him from this truth? It was past 2 a.m. before I finally slept. When I woke, morning light spilled into the room. On the floor, just inside my door, was a thin envelope. Inside, a single folded note. 4 handwritten words. We need to talk. I stared at the familiar handwriting, feeling the walls closing in. I sat on the edge of the bed, the note soft in my hand, damp from sweat. We need to talk. 4 words, like a dull knife. Not piercing, but cutting. Again and again. My mind spun with possibilities. Talk about what? This trip, Daniel, or Noah. And why did it read like a warning instead of an invitation? Part of me wanted to throw the note in the trash, pretend I'd never seen it. But the other part, the part already hurt and desperate for the truth, pushed me to answer. I grabbed a pen, wrote a few words on the back. Hotel Café, Novia. I slid it back under her door, then sat down. In the stillness, it hit me. I was about to face the person who once was my whole world, and now, the source of every doubt I had. A few minutes before 9, I was in the cafe downstairs, tucked in a corner by the window. The smell of roasted coffee hung in the air, but it wasn't warm anymore. My eyes kept drifting to the entrance, waiting for the moment that would change everything. Exactly at 9, Madeline walked in. No black dress, no red heels, just a cream sweater and jeans. It looked simple, but to me, it was a disguise. She sat down across from me, set her purse on the chair beside her, and spoke evenly. What are you doing in Chicago, Trevor? No surprise, no fear. That unsettled me more than seeing her with Daniel. I kept my voice calm. I came to surprise you. Turns out, I'm the one surprised. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. What did you see? Enough to know who Daniel Brooks is. The name left my mouth, and her lips trembled, just a fraction. But instead of denying it, she looked down at her coffee, fingers turning the cup handle slowly. You don't understand, Trevor. It's not that simple. Then explain it. She drew a breath. Daniel's been helping me. When you're busy, I feel left behind. I needed someone to listen. I almost laughed. But inside, it felt like a stone pressing on my chest. Sleeping with someone is listening now. A few heads turned from nearby tables. Madeline didn't answer. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She glanced at the screen, just long enough for me to see the words. Lawyer Graham? A cold shiver ran down my spine. Why was she talking to a lawyer? And why? Had I never heard the name? She declined the call, placed the phone face down. Trevor, I need time. Give me a few weeks, then we'll talk about Noah. Noah. Just hearing his name tightened my chest. Whatever hope I had for fixing this was gone. She stood, leaned close to my ear, voice low. "Don't make this harder, Trevor. For Noah." And then she walked away, leaving behind a cold cup of coffee and a colder emptiness across the table. For Noah. Her words echoed in my head like a curse. Not a plea, but a warning. I stared at the cafe door closing, trying to figure out, was she protecting Noah or threatening to use him as leverage? I pulled out my phone, dialed Mark. "Find me everything on a lawyer named Graham, and start a file, worst case scenario." Mark's voice dropped. "If she's talking to Graham, there's a good chance she's preparing for divorce and a custody fight. You need to be ready." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The thought of Noah calling someone else dad made my blood boil. I'd never been afraid of losing my wife, but losing my son, that was unthinkable. Back in my room, I opened my laptop, pulled together everything. Photos, messages, work schedules, emails. Each image, each line of text, a slice of my life with Noah. Proof that I'd always been there. Amid the anger, I realized I wasn't just afraid of betrayal. I was afraid of losing. Every bedtime story, every morning drive to school, the sound of paper sliding under my door broke my focus. A thin envelope lay on the floor. No sender. Inside, a printed photo. Madeline and Daniel, hand in hand, but not at this hotel. In front of a suburban house I didn't recognize. Below the photo, a scrawled note. "You don't know everything." I froze. Someone else was watching them. Friend or enemy. Before I could think, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to meet, alone, tonight. Dad. Daniel." I replied instantly. "Where?" "Bar across from the hotel. Just p.m." Another text came through before I could put the phone down. "If you don't want Noah to know the truth, don't bring anyone." I sat there, gripping the phone. I didn't know what truth he meant, but I knew one thing. At 11 tonight, I'd walk into a room where every word, every glance, could decide my son's future. Winsett P.A. The street outside the hotel was so quiet. I could hear my own shoes on the rain-slick bricks. The red neon from the bar across the street flickered, spilling a dull, blood-colored glow onto the sidewalk. I pushed the door open. The smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hung in the air. Classic rock played somewhere in the background, mingled with the raspy laughter of a few late-night drinkers. Daniel sat in the far corner, back against the wall, a glass of whiskey in front of him, catching the muted yellow light. He looked at me, like he'd been waiting. I pulled out a chair. "No small talk. What do you want?" Daniel leaned back, took a slow sip before answering. "I want to help you, if you're smart enough to listen." I gave a dry smile. "Help? You take my wife, and now you want to help? Just say it." He leaned forward, voice low. "Madeline isn't just cheating on you. She's getting ready to erase you from Noah's life. Completely." My fists clenched. "I know about Graham." Daniel nodded slightly. "Then you should also know. That house in the photo, someone sent you. It belongs to Graham. Madeline's been there twice in the last month. Not just with me." It felt like a stone had been dropped onto my chest. I stared at him, mind spinning. "That envelope was from you." A faint smile. No answer. Instead, he slid his phone across the table. On the screen, photos of Madeline leaving that same house, with a tall, thin man, gray hair. "This man is Graham's associate, and they weren't just talking about you. They were talking about Noah." Each word hit like a hammer behind my temples. I saw Noah in my mind, small, fragile, standing between two adults, being pulled apart. I could barely breathe. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel's eyes were steady, but tired. "Because I'm just a pawn, too. If she wins, you and we're both gone." The air between us was thick. I didn't know whether to believe him, but instinct told me this was no longer just between me and Madeline. Noah was the prize. Daniel stood, set his glass down, leaned in close, his voice like a blade. "If you don't believe me, be ready to say goodbye to Noah." His words rang in my head like an alarm. I sat still, watching every move he made, trying to read the truth and the trap. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice rough, like gravel. "We need proof, not about the affair. Proof she's moving to take Noah away from you. I can't do it alone." I gave a bitter laugh. And I'm supposed to trust you? No answer. He simply set a USB drive on the table. Listen to this. Then you'll understand. I picked it up, slipped it into my pocket. If this is a setup. He cut me off, calm, sharp. If it was, you'd already be dead the moment you walked in here. Daniel turned to leave. At the door, he looked back. Monday, she'll be back. That's when the last move gets played. Back in my room, I locked the door, pulled the curtains. Only the hum of the AC and the dim glow of the desk lamp. I plugged the USB into my laptop. One file, Noah. MP3. A door opening. The click of heels. Then Madeline's voice, cold as steel. I want full custody of Noah. Trevor will no longer be in his life. My chest tightened, my heartbeat pounding in my ears, my fingers numb on the keyboard. A man's voice next. Graham, I guessed. We'll build a damaging profile on him. Daniel is just leverage. My shadow shook on the wall, warped under the flickering light. Not just betrayal, not just love. She was planning to take my son and twist everything I'd ever done against me. I closed the laptop, looked out into the night. The city lights were still shining, but in me, everything had gone dark. I didn't know exactly what I'd do on Monday. I only knew one thing. Noah won't be here when she comes back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Madeline's voice cut through like a blade. Trevor will no longer be in his life. I lost track of how much coffee I drank. My eyes burned. My heart felt like a stone, pounding in my chest. When the first light bled through the curtains, I called Mark. We start now. I want to make sure Noah's with me before she gets back. Mark paused for a moment. You sure? Once you take this step, there's no turning back. I'm sure. She's chosen war. We agreed to prepare every piece of proof that I was Noah's primary caregiver. I spent the morning digging through hard drives, my phone, old storage boxes, every photo, every receipt, each one a fragment of my life with my boy. By noon, I drove to the house. The door was locked, but my key still worked. Inside, silence. Only the tick of the kitchen clock. On the table, an unwashed cereal bowl, and Noah's green cup, ringed with dried milk. I stepped into his room. Toys lined up neatly on the shelf. Blanket folded tight. Too neat. I sat on the edge of his bed, pressed my face into the small pillow, breathed deep. Baby soap and sunlight. A smell I feared might be gone forever. As I stood, my hand caught on the desk drawer. Inside, a crude drawing. 3 figures holding hands. Me, Madeline, and Noah. But my face was crossed out, replaced by a stranger with gray hair. My chest sank. Who had made my son draw this? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She's coming back early. Be ready. I gripped the phone tighter. That afternoon, I met Briggs, a detective Mark recommended. Tall, broad shoulders, a face lined by years of work, eyes sharp as glass. I can tail her from the airport, he said, voice low and firm. And get things the court can't ignore. As much as you can, I answered. That night, I sat alone in the dark apartment, the laptop glow lighting my face. Mark called. Briggs saw her switch flights and meet someone at the airport. Daniel. I asked. War? No. Someone else. And I think you'll want to know his name. Mark's voice slowed. Richard Cole. The name dropped like lead into my gut. Richard, a notorious custody lawyer, Graham's close friend. If Madeline had met him at the airport, she'd just placed her final piece on the board. Briggs says they went straight to the Westmont Hotel, Mark continued. I gripped the phone. I'm going there tonight. The Westmont glowed bright in the center of the city, but the light did nothing to warm the chill crawling up my spine. Briggs was waiting in the parking lot. He handed me an envelope. Inside, photos of Madeline and Richard sitting close. Papers spread out on the table between them. If you want to confront her, do it now, Briggs said. By morning, it could be too late. I took the elevator to the 8th floor. My heart pounded so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I forced my face into something cold, unreadable. Any crack, and they'd smell blood. Room 805's door was ajar. I knocked twice. Madeline opened it. A flicker of surprise, quickly smoothed into a thin smile. Trevor, out this late? I stepped inside without answering. Richard stood by the table, folding papers slowly. He smirked. You think a few photos and a recording will save you? I've seen dozens of fathers like you. Most of them lose. I kept my tone flat. Maybe, but none of them had what I have. I placed a copy of the audio file on the table. I've heard everything. Daniel's just a pawn. And Richard, you're just the knife she borrowed. Madeline crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. You think that will scare me? The court believes mothers, not unstable men. I stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. The court will see Noah's drawing, and they'll ask, who told him to cross out his father's face? Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she looked down and steadied herself. Richard tapped his pen against the table, slow, deliberate, like a countdown. The dim yellow light cast our shadows long across the carpet, overlapping like a silent power struggle. Tomorrow, I'll file for a temporary custody order, I said. I have photos, recordings, witnesses. If you want a war, I'll give you one. But don't expect me to watch while my son disappears. I turned to leave. My hand was shaking, but I hid it in my coat pocket. Before stepping out, I said, Monday, when you come home, Noah won't be there. The door closed. The hum of the AC sealed the silence inside. I walked down the hallway, each step heavy, but knowing I had just made my first move back. I woke before the alarm. Pale light slipped through the blinds, the city wrapped in gray clouds, heavy with rain. I looked around the small room. Files, photos, recordings, all packed neatly into a bag, ready for my meeting with the lawyer. Mark called at 7. Briggs says they're still at the hotel. Haven't left yet. Good. I kept it short. But inside, I knew time was running out. I drove to Noah's house. The door was open. Briggs stood on the porch, hands in his coat pockets, eyes sharp. The kids in the kitchen. I'll watch the front. Noah was sitting on a chair, legs swinging, holding a cereal bowl. When he saw me, his face lit up. Dad. That word? It tore through every layer of armor I'd built in the past few days. I sat beside him, ran my hand through his soft hair. Tomorrow, where do you want to go with me? He tilted his head, thinking. His eyes squinted. To the beach. With the blue kite. I laughed. A rare sound lately. But right after, a quiet fear crept in. Fear that one day, someone might cut this joy short. When Noah ran out to the yard, I stayed, watching through the window. Those little footsteps had no idea. A war was being fought outside, just to keep him free like this. My hand tightened around the car key in my pocket, next to the papers for the new apartment I'd rented for the two of us. That afternoon, I sat alone in a cafe near the courthouse. The file sat on the table, but my eyes were far away. I thought about everything. The drawing with my face crossed out, Madeline's cold voice, and that dad. From this morning, I realized I wasn't just fighting to keep Noah. I was fighting to keep the last good part of myself. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You can't hide him forever. I froze. My eyes swept the street through the cafe window. There, parked just a few meters away, a black sedan. Windows tinted. No view inside. I stepped out, holding the file bag tight. Cold wind carried the smell of rain against my face. Walking toward my car, I saw the sedan start its engine, rolling forward slowly. When I pulled away, it merged into traffic, keeping just enough distance. I didn't know what the court would decide tomorrow, but I knew the fight wasn't over. And when Noah asked, Dad, are we really going to the beach? I just smiled, eyes on the rearview mirror, the black car still trailing far behind. Yeah, and you'll fly that kite higher than anyone. The sky deepened into dark gray. Raindrops began to fall. I pressed down on the gas.